Good morning, and thanks so much for joining us today here on Aspire to Retire with Ralph and Tim Short, the father-son team, and the financial advisors behind Welcome Home Financial Partners. You can find out more about them, the entire team. Set up a time to speak with them over there on the website. That is welcomehomefp.com. You can also give a call, 804-635-3550, if you have questions about what we talk about today on the show, just questions about your retirement in general, whether it's a second set of eyes on your plan or a first set of eyes on your lack of a plan. That is the number to begin that retirement roadmap process, 804-635-3550. My name is Chris Swan, and I'm pleased to be joined, as I am every show, with the father-son team. Ralph, Tim, good to see you guys again. How you doing today?
Doing great. Wonderful.
Well, good. I'm glad to hear it. Appreciate you guys taking time out of your Sunday morning to spend with the listeners here. So let's get this. You work for 30 or 40 years, and during that time, you're considered a long-term investor. Then your retirement, depending on when you retire, could last another 30 years, almost as much time as you spent in the working world. Why are you not considered a long-term investor at that point? Why does your investing philosophy have to change?
Well, I think the biggest way to answer that is market volatility, right? You know, there's a lot of people when they get into retirement, they got to use the funds that they've worked so hard for. And one of the worst mistakes that we see is everybody's still all in on the stock market, because especially in today's world, we see there's a new headline every morning you wake up, right? So that drives a lot of that volatility. So I think it's important as people are approaching retirement or even in retirement, maybe we start taking a look at doing something a little bit different and not just kind of riding a roller coaster. You know, most people, once they get into retirement, they want that peace of mind and they want to make sure that they can do the things that they want. Mm-hmm. Well, when they signed up for that 401k 30 or 40 years ago, most people are still the same way. So the biggest difference is that once we get to retirement, we can no longer contribute, nor will our employer, and we might have to start pulling some funds out. And guess what? If you start losing money and you're pulling money out, you know, it might take a lot longer to rebound if you ever rebound. So I think it's important with that. There's a terminology called time horizon, and that's taking a look at, you know, your horizon as far as the time for when you're going to use these funds. And I think most people, as they're approaching retirement, these are things that they need to think about. One of the biggest things that they need to think about, because in today's world, each day is going to bring something different. And the worst thing that you can do is just turn a blind eye to it and just say, well, it's going to hopefully be there when I get to retirement. Mm. But you bring up a good point, Chris, is there's a lot of people who want to retire earlier, right? So if we retire at 50 or 55 or 60, well, hopefully we might live longer in retirement than our working years. So that's something to think about. There's that longevity piece as well.
And I would say for most people, you know, like Tim was talking about a minute ago, when you're no longer able to put money aside into that 401k or your IRA or whatever it is that you've got set up for retirement income, you know, and you take a hit from the volatility when the market goes down and you're not able to throw money back into it, but you're taking it out, it really has a double whammy on you, because not only are you not contributing, you're taking money out when the market's going down. So you need to have some of that money maybe a little bit more secured, so you don't have to really worry so much about the when you take the money out. But a lot of people really don't understand the impact of when you take money out and how much you take out and how it's going to affect you, you know, if you do have a 30 or 40 year time horizon. You don't want to give up the market altogether, because that's going to help you beat inflation when inflation hits again, because right. You're always going to have a little bit of inflation no matter what, because that's just built into our system, I think, is the way it looks like to me, because it's never have stopped in my 70 some years, you know. It's always there. It's some days is a little bit more than others. Some philosophies, let's say, in the Congress changes, and then all of a sudden we have a lot bigger inflation rate than others. So you just have to be prepared. So it's like I tell all the clients that come in, particularly the ones that think they know it all, and I'd say, you know, when 2008 hit, it probably took you about 10 to 12 years before you actually got back up to the same amount that was in your 401k. And they'll tell me, oh, no, I'm pretty good. I've done it in 5 or 6 years. I said, well, yeah, you might have, but guess what? You forgot that you were adding money to your 401k.
That's right.
And so was your employer, and the market was going up at the same time. So that's why you went back to, 5 or 6 years with the same account value, not because you're that good, but, you have to have a philosophy that I'm going to stick with this. I'm going to have to figure out what is best for me, not what my neighbor is telling me, not what my coworkers telling me. It's what's best for me. And you do need to change maybe your risk a little bit, but do you know what your risk tolerance is? Do you know what it is that you need when you are going to retire? Because everybody's different. And that's kind of where we kind of let people understand, what through our roadmap process, how much is it going to take for you to live in retirement? Do you have enough? Where's it going to come from? Those are all issues that we try to resolve for people when they come in and go through our process. And yes, you might have decades in retirement, but you just don't know that. I just got through talking to somebody this morning, called in from our TV program, and he told me point blank, he said, I'm 60 years old, and my family history is between 60 and 65. I won't be here, so I need to know when I'm going to retire. I said, well, I just don't know if you can specifically say you're not going to be here in 5 years, but we can kind of show you where you can take the money and enjoy a little bit of what you got left. And to me, that's what this is all about. It's not about where you got your money. It's all those lifetime experiences, whether it's 3 years or 30 years. Be prepared.
We talk about Ralph and Tim being fiduciaries, acting in the client's best interest very often here on the show, telling them things that they need to hear versus what they want to hear. And I do not believe they would be acting in your best interest if they thought that you would not be here for a long period of time. You would not have a long retirement. That's certainly the hope, right? Certainly hope that you enjoy that. It's one thing to know what your risk tolerance is. It's another thing to make sure that your investments align with that risk tolerance, because, it's really easy to say, oh yeah, I have no problem with market volatility when the volatility is not present. But as time goes on, we know over the course of a 20, 30-year retirement, it's going to creep in probably multiple times. So you want to find that balance between security, protection, and growth. Because as you guys mentioned, you can't understate the growth potential in the markets. There is portions of your money you're not going to touch for 15 or 20 years. And so you can, in fact, think like a younger-minded, a long-term investor, but not for all of it. Don't put all your eggs in one basket, as they say. Finding that right blend, having that understanding is as easy as having a conversation with Ralph and Tim Short and the team at Welcome Home Financial Partners. You can go to welcomehomefp.com to schedule a time to speak with them, or you can give a call as well, 804-635-3550. Now, a recent study by the Economic Innovation Group estimates that actually nearly half of full-time American workers, they don't have access to a retirement plan on a job like their 401ks or 403bs, the alphabet soup of retirement. President Trump recently said during his State of the Union address, he'd like to help remedy that.
Next year, my administration will give these oft-forgotten American workers, great people, the people that built our country, access to the same type of retirement plan offered to every federal worker. We will match your contribution with up to $1,000 each year.
Now, that is great news, potentially for people, early on in their careers who don't have this. Now it's a way to build that retirement account. But for those who are getting ready to retire soon, that may not have enough time to help with the growth potential there. It really does underscore how retirement income planning has shifted away from pensions and employer oversight to putting the onus on the individual, on the employee. And those that are close to retirement, they've got the least room for error. They've got to make sure that they're threading that needle. Is there a way to transfer some of that longevity and market risk off of the shoulders of these retirees?
Oh, absolutely. And I think, the retirement's different this year than it was 10 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago. And it's important that you go out and you seek that information. And hopefully, if somebody doesn't have a 401k, that they've at least been saving somehow or another, whether it's, using the banking system, which hopefully that wasn't everything, because of course you don't get a whole lot of return there. But, you can participate in an IRA. Now you don't get the match. So it's nice that some of these other things are going to roll out. But I think when it comes down to it, pensions are hard to come by these days. And once again, is the employer essentially doesn't want to be on the hook for that long, because if we are living longer, that's more money that they have to have in that pension fund to make sure that they take care of all their employees. So, there's ways of doing that. So if you want to buy your own pension, absolutely, there's ways of doing that. And annuity is one of those ways that you can have that guaranteed income. So if you don't have a pension and you're listening and you're interested in ways to create your guaranteed income stream, that could be one way of doing that. But there's a lot of things out there. But once again, I think hope that there are people out there that if they didn't have a retirement plan through work, that they were doing it on their own, whether it was a Roth IRA or an IRA.
And I would say to most people, it's amazing to me the number of people that come in and we have a conversation during our roadmap process. how many that we have to convince that's a good idea for you to participate in your 401k if you're lucky enough to have one, or some type of retirement program wherever you work. It's just a lot of people, first off, they've never been, let's say, educated or at least discuss why it's important for you to do it. It's not because your employer is glad to give you some money. It's also important for you to understand it is your retirement, not your employer's retirement. So you need to figure out what you need to do to do that. But, a lot of people need to be schooled, and it's just not with big employees or big employers. It's with anybody that, like Tim said, if you don't have capability of participating in any type of retirement program through work, you do have an IRA. You can contribute that way. But for most small business people, and that's where a lot of people miss the boat, particularly business owners, they are going to put their money in keeping that business afloat without thinking about their financial security when they are wanting to retire, when they are not wanting to do this anymore, or they can't do it anymore. What are you going to do with that business that you put all your blood, sweat, and tear and money in if you don't have access to some way to get out? So, everybody thinks that's going to be their retirement year, their account with their business, but sometimes it doesn't work out that way, because whatever you're doing really depends on what you do. And if you're no longer there, you kind of have to have the right buyer. You got to have the right exit strategy, whatever you want to call it, to make sure your retirement is going to be good, because you didn't work 40 or 50 years and put all your money through that business not to receive some benefits when you retire. Because I don't know of any closely held business owner that would like to retire off of just Social Security. So if you're not contributing to some type of retirement program yourself or have an exit strategy, guess what? You're going to be sitting there just with Social Security and maybe some savings that you've done through banks or whatever, and it may not be enough. So you need to be thinking about things like that. It takes planning.
Yeah, and a good point to that too is, you got to think about all the potential interest you could have missed out on with investing. You could have missed out on some tax deductions during the years. I mean, there's a lot to do with that. You've got to see what's out there and what's available. And, kind of going back to the question we had before, is there's a lot of people out there that don't necessarily know what options are available to them, right? So if you can say, hey, well, I do have this 401k, I don't know if I want to de-risk my portfolio or not, how can you get somebody to help you out? So I think it's very important to always see what your options look like. Doesn't mean every option's right for you, but at least you know what's out there.
And I would say for most people, things change constantly. So you need to be on top of things. And we don't have time to know all the nuances, not just with retirement programs, but with tax laws and things like that. I mean, last time you went to a class on investment or tax planning, Chris, was when? Probably
1990, never. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
There is a certain point where, for the vast majority of our listeners out there, where you will no longer be working. And hopefully that is on your terms. You get to work as long as you want. Here's the thing. Once you retire, you're still going to have expenditures. Things still cost money once you no longer work. So how are you creating that income? That's what we talk about, those retirement accounts, turning that into retirement income. If you do not have those accounts, well, that is a whole other situation. And that's what President Trump is trying to address in the State of the Union, those accounts that he's talking about. In the meantime, because he said next year, what do you do? Well, sit down and have a conversation with the team that can help people, get to, through, and beyond retirement with that retirement roadmap process. Find out, yes, there may be more work that you need to do before you get there, but they will, the sooner you find out, the sooner you can take those steps. But it all begins with that phone call, 804-635-3550. You can go to the website, find out more about upcoming events that the team has, find a way to attend those and meet them in a more informal setting, or just come into the office as well, one of the 3 offices in the Richmond area. The website is welcomehomefp.com. Now, once again, geopolitical tensions overseas, they are raising economic concerns here at home. CNBC talked to Jamie Dimon, JP Morgan Chase CEO Jamie Dimon, after the U.S. and Israel attacked Iran. He's keeping his eye on inflation.
I think there's some risk, more inflation than people think, and that could be like a skunk in a party if that ever happens. Hopefully it doesn't happen, and no one actually knows. But this right now will increase gas prices a little bit. And again, if it's not prolonged, there's not going to be a major inflationary hit. Again, if it went on for a long time, that would be different.
Now, when you guys put together your retirement roadmaps, do you build in room for surprise shocks? How often do you stress test the plan?
Well, did he say skunk at a party?
He did. Yeah, I know that too.
Okay. That's a hell of an analogy. I haven't heard that before. I was a little taken back by that. But yeah, I mean, I know we've talked off air before about, what's going on and, the craziness in the world and how it affects the market. Mm-hmm. If we look at last year when the tariffs were rolling out, end of first quarter, beginning of second quarter, we had a downward spiral in the market, right? But we came back and last year was a good year for the market. So that's what's important. Yes, we want to make sure that we stress test. Yes, there's always going to be events that come up. But what's important is staying the course, because and most people do this at this point in time, is a lot of people say, okay, hey, guess what? Here comes World War III. I'm going to take everything out at this point. Well, guess what? If all of a sudden, we accomplish our objectives, whatever they may potentially be, and we get out, then the market's probably going to respond fairly well. If you've got your money sitting on the sideline, you're going to miss out on that. So there's so many things that will happen year in and year out. It's important to remember that even in a really good year in the market, there's going to be bad times. There's always going to be volatility. So as long as you believe in your investments and your strategies, we do need to take a look at that. We do need to add a little buffer in there. The plan's got to be flexible, but it's important to stay the course.
And I would say you just need to make some course directions changes maybe, but not exactly change the course of your direction. It's just maybe make some adjustments. But I would say for most people, the biggest mistake that I see with them is knee-jerk reactions. Because if you listen to this program, they're going to tell you doom and gloom. If you change the channel, it's going to be, it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. So you just don't know who to believe. It's just you got to take responsibility and know that, all right, if you don't need this money in your retirement account for another 5 to 10 years, then let's not take it completely away from the market, but let's adjust it a little bit. Maybe instead of having 100% in the market, maybe you have 90% in the market and know that 10% is going to be here because this is what you're going to use to pay your bills when you start to retire. I mean, there's a lot of different things, and it's not any one thing, any rule of thumb or anything like that. It's always going to be based on what it is that you're trying to do. It's always based on your goals and aspiration, your lifestyle that you want. You may have only a couple of $100,000 in your retirement accounts, but you don't have any debt. So you might be in pretty good shape because your Social Security is paying all your bills. So, hey, you got a pretty good lifestyle. But then if you got $5 million and you are spending $100,000 a year on just vacations, it's probably not going to look as good as you might have thought. So like I say, the biggest thing for most people, they need to throttle back on those knee-jerk reactions. I mean, we can talk about 1987. We can talk about the 1990s when the dot-com bubble in the 2000s, and even early as 2008. And then let's take a look at what happened during COVID, when everything dropped and everybody knew that it was just going to be a black swan event. Well, it was for a couple of months and then went back up to where it was. That is highly unusual, but you need to be prepared and not have a knee-jerk reaction.
And I think being more proactive is better than reactive. And I think a lot of people nowadays will do the opposite. But, if you take a look at a well-built retirement plan, right, a retirement income plan, you're going to probably see some sort of buckets, right? We're not going to have all of our money in the same place doing the same thing at the same time, because if we do and things go down like they've been, well, guess what? There goes the portfolio. So I think it's important as we're approaching retirement, talking about your options. What options do you have to where you could minimize or eliminate any risk in the stock market with some of your money? I think it's important, and it makes people a lot easier to stay the course when we know at least some of our money is not being negatively affected.
There is always going to be something out there beyond our control that is going to affect the markets. Right now it's the geopolitical situation in the Middle East. Last year it was tariff talk, COVID. These are all obviously different factors, and how they overall affected the market does vary, but the housing crisis of 2008, the dot-com bubble, as you mentioned earlier, Ralph, you just need to plan for the fact that there is going to be volatility. And it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. You want to make sure that you are not, as we are getting closer and closer to retirement, we're all older and wiser since 2008, but we're closer to retirement. We can't afford 8 to 10 years to recover, and it will take longer because, Ralph, as you pointed out earlier, we're no longer contributing to our 401ks. Do you want to delay your retirement for 8 to 10 years? Probably not. You probably don't want to delay it for 8 to 10 months if you had the option out there. But dialing back some of that risk and finding that right blend for you, and being able to tune out the financial noise while also taking into account that there are going to be hiccups along the way. That is what the retirement roadmap is for. Figuring out how to get back on course when these other factors pull us away from the main path. But it all begins with setting up a time to speak with Ralph Short and Tim Short, the team at Welcome Home Financial Partners. You can do that by giving a call, 804-635-3550, or you can go to the website as well. That's welcomehomefp.com. Now, when you think of billionaires, you might assume they hand everything over to accountants and never look at a bill, but not Oprah.
My thing is sign every check. I still do. And also show up for all the financial meetings, whether you know what they're talking about or not. Yeah. I still see all the invoices. It makes me ill. Have found mistakes. But I think if you don't, then you're just sort of floating and you don't have any idea of how things operate, how things really run, what things really cost, what it costs to be you. Because there's a price to be you. And nobody else knows what that is. And the person who really should know is the person who's in charge.
The price to be you. When somebody comes in to see you guys, do they usually know their true cost to be them over a 20 to 30-year retirement, as we're talking about earlier, or is that something you help them figure out?
All right, the cost to you, to be you. That's another interesting statement we've got today. So I think most people don't necessarily know exactly what it does cost to be them, but they do know that there are some costs that potentially could go down or be eliminated. We talk about this phrase quite a bit, which actually came from a current client, talking about Amazonnesia, right? We buy so much on Amazon that we forget what shows up at the front door the next day. I think those are some things that people don't necessarily incorporate in their budget. Mm-hmm. They do probably have a good handle on their normal expenses, right? So their mortgage, if they've got one, rent. When it comes down to insurances, something that's often overlooked is property taxes, right? So I think there's a lot of things that people don't necessarily know. And they say, well, I know with my big factors as far as my mortgage, my car payments, these types of things, I know where I'm at. Well, then the next thing you know, that might be $3,000 for the month. But then the next thing you know, they've doubled because they're going out to eat every other day, because their grocery bill is extremely high, because they're buying the organic food. I mean, there's so many things that come into that. So there's not a whole lot of people that know their true cost. But this is a big piece of the retirement income plan, because if you don't know what it costs to be you, how do you know if you have enough money? How do you know if you're not going to run out? So once again, these are a lot of good questions to ask.
And I would say number one thing that when we go through our roadmap process, that most people don't know exactly what they are spending their money on. But one of the big factors when I say, okay, well, how much do you spend on Christmas, anniversary, birthday gifts? And they look at me like, well, I hadn't thought about it like that. I'm like, well, that's still money out of your pocket. Now, when you are working and you can afford $5,000 a year on Christmas, okay, that's one thing. But when you're retiring, that may hit you a little bit harder than you anticipated. So those are things that we built in to let you visualize how it's going to look in retirement. Because as Tim will say to people, well, you really don't want to retire to go back to work because you don't have enough money, do you? Mm. And that's the key issue here is, what is it going to look like for you? And a lot of people will think that expenses are going to go down. Expenses are maybe going to be lower because of this and that factor. Well, guess what? Even if they stayed the same, use the same product, guess what? Inflation is going to hit you a little bit, so it's going to go up every year. So how's that going to affect your retirement income planning prospect? So it's just small little things like that can really cost you big money over a 20 or 30 year period. And if you're not prepared for it, it could come back to bite you.
Yeah, one of the things that people often overlook is taxation, right? I met with a couple earlier this week, and he's about to retire from UPS. I mean, they're both in their mid to upper 50s, and she works for VCU. And when it comes down to cash flow, they're in really good shape. And then we sit there and we take a look at the investments because we're going through the roadmap process, and pretty much everything's pre-tax. So technically, they don't necessarily need to pull any money from their accounts until they get to RMD age. And that's what their plan was until we looked at forecasting out what those RMDs would look like. And once we got, because it would take 19 years for both of them to reach RMD age. Once again, as RMD age is currently, right? And they're based off the performance in their accounts, it was going to be about $500,000 they were going to have to take out of their accounts in order to satisfy the required minimum distribution.
Wow.
So that's a cost to you. So why not start taking out distributions along the way, or maybe doing some Roth conversions or things like that. So that is something that most folks don't actually factor into their cost of their everyday.
You know why that is, Chris?
Why?
Because they've been told all their working lives that when they retire, they're going to be in a lower tax bracket.
That's true. That's not true.
True.
Yeah, that's what they've been told. And the reality is most people are actually still making as much, or if not drawing in more income in retirement than they were in the working world. And, congratulations to that. That is a sign of a, successful plan leading up to it. But who also really takes pride in you being successful is Uncle Sam, because he's going to want his cut. And, is it fair? Well, we can debate that. But if there are ways to minimize that, as I've said many times here on the show, writing a check to Uncle Sam is as bad as a market downturn, if not worse, because that money's not coming back. That money's gone. If you've got time on your side in the market, and we talked about that a little earlier, chances are history will show it will come back a little bit. But you want to have a plan that doesn't just take into account market volatility or inflation or taxation. You want something that is all encompassing, and that is what you get with the retirement roadmap. And that begins with a phone call to a team at Welcome Home Financial Partners, 804-635-3550, or go into the website at welcomehomefp.com. Now, year after year, the Eagles, they've ranked as one of the highest grossing concert tours. But if they're still on your bucket list, if you haven't seen them yet, you might want to consider buying a ticket this year, because Don Henley was on CBS Sunday Morning recently, and he said 2026, this could be the end of the Eagles.
I think this year will probably be it, and I'm okay with that. I would like to spend more time with my family, and I would like to spend more time growing vegetables. And I've traveled all over the world, but I haven't seen much of it because we see the airports and the hotel room and the venue, and we don't get out much. And so I'd like to go back to some of the same places I've been and see more of those places. I have 4 kids and a grandchild, and there's just lots of other things to do.
Now, a lot of people say the same thing when it comes to their retirement. How do you help somebody make sure that their plan doesn't turn into a, someday maybe?
Well, I guess we could just turn it into Hotel California, right?
Right.
I think there's a lot of people out there. I shouldn't say a lot, but we meet with several people that don't necessarily want to spend any money. They want to leave it to their kids, their grandkids, or whatever. Everybody's going to be a little bit different, but I think when it comes down to enjoying your life, that's probably going to take a little bit of money out of your retirement accounts, right? To take those trips, for instance, if you want to take out your kids or your grandkids on trips, that's going to cost some money. So, everybody's going to be in a little bit of a different position, and what you don't want to do is look back and regret what you have or have not done. So that's why I think it is important to, and Dad and I talk about this quite a bit, is there is the financial side of retiring, but then there's also that emotional side. If you have no idea what you want to do as you're approaching retirement, well, it's a good time to start mapping out some new hobbies, right? Let's plan a bucket list trip. Let's do these fun things. But we also need to incorporate in that retirement plan, because most of the time, most people, they're going to travel more in their earlier years in retirement than they will in the later years, not necessarily because they don't want to, but because they can't. So that's why I think it's important, as we're entering in retirement, to focus on the fun things that we wanted to do too.
And I would say for most people, things are going to happen in your lifetime, whether it's in retirement or before you retire, that you didn't anticipate. I can tell you from experience, somebody that I know and have worked with for a while, 30 some years old, and all of a sudden he got a diagnosis of cancer, and they don't, know what's going to happen. So if you wait too long, you might not have enjoyed life like you ought to, because life is about experiences. It's not about that big pile of money that you might have left somebody. So if you waited too long, what's that mean? We don't know, because you don't know how long you have to enjoy what it is that you've gotten right now. So let's take a little bit, not be foolish about it, but let's enjoy life a little bit. Let's help you be able to sleep at night and enjoy life, enjoy your grandkids, enjoy whatever it is that you want to do, whether it's play golf or whether it's travel around the world. Enjoy your life a little bit. Enjoy that lifestyle that you've always dreamed about, and not worry so much.
That's really what it's all about, is being able to make these memories. As people, they make photo albums, whether it is just on their phone or social media, or, they do Shutterfly, digital frames. What doesn't go into those photo albums, I have to imagine, I haven't seen one, is a picture of their 401k statement. It's not something that's not what they're going to take with them at the end of the day. It is about the memories, the lifestyle that obviously these investments lead toward. Finding out how to turn this into income, turn it into memories, not just about the money. That is what the team at Welcome Home Financial Partners helps their clients with. And it all begins with the phone call. Well, actually, it begins by you joining us this week, spending time with us. The next step is letting them put pen to paper, start creating that retirement roadmap. 804-635-3550 is how you do it. As always, we appreciate you joining us, spending part of the day here on Aspire to Retire with Ralph and Tim Short. Hope you have a great week ahead of you. Hope you stay safe out there. Gentlemen, appreciate the time as always. And as we wrap up, I do want to leave you with the final word.
Yeah, thank you, Chris, and we appreciate your time as well. But we've talked a lot about uncertainty and a whole lot of change going on, estate planning, Roth conversions. These things are very important and can be very important for your retirement plan. So, if anything you heard today kind of struck a nerve, if you will, give us a call. We'd love to see what kind of value we can provide for you. We bring you into the office and we can create your very own retirement roadmap. But pick up the phone, give us a call, visit the website, attend one of the first Friday events. We'd love the opportunity to meet with you. So we want to thank everybody for listening, and take care.
All content is for information purposes only. It is not intended to provide any tax or legal advice or provide the basis for any financial decision, nor is it intended to be a projection of current or future performance or indication or future results. Opinions expressed herein are solely those of Welcome Home Financial Partners and Welcome Home Wealth Advisors, LLC. The information contained in this material has been derived from sources believed to be reliable, but is not guaranteed as to accuracy and completeness, and does not purport to a complete analysis of the materials discussed. All information and ideas should be discussed in detail with your individual advisor prior to the implementation. Each individual investor's situation is different, and any ideas provided may not be appropriate for your particular circumstance. Advisor services are offered by Welcome Home Wealth Advisors, LLC, a registered investment advisor in the state of Virginia. Being registered as an investment advisor does not imply a certain level of skill or training. Insurance products and services are offered through WPI Holding, Virginia Insurance License Number 138509, an affiliated company. The information contained herein should in no way be construed or interpreted as a solicitation to sell or offer to sell advisory services to any residents of any state other than the state of Virginia or where otherwise legally permitted. Welcome Home Wealth Advisors, LLC and Welcome Home Financial Partners are not affiliated with or endorsed by the Social Security Administration or any government agency.